Don't lie to me. Mafia boss saw the bruise on Waitress's face. What he did next left everyone speechless. The bell above the diner's door chimed as Luca Marino entered, his polished Italian leather shoes a stark contrast to the cracked linoleum floor. The familiar scent of coffee and grilled onions filled his nostrils. This place was far beneath his usual standards, but something about its simplicity drew him here when he needed to think. His presence commanded attention, even in casual clothes. The other customers seemed to sense the danger that clung to him like an expensive cologne, their conversations dropping to whispers. A businessman loosened his tie, gathering his things quickly. A mother pulled her child closer. Luca's dark eyes scanned the diner, taking in every detail as he always did. The flickering fluorescent light in the corner, the worn red vinyl booths, the endless drip of coffee into stained glass pots. Then he saw her. Before you continue listening, please let me know where in the world are you watching from today. Now back to the story. Ella moved between tables with practiced grace, her movements careful and measured. Her long brown hair was pulled back in a neat ponytail, revealing delicate features that seemed too refined for this shabby establishment. But it wasn't her beauty that caught his attention today. It was the bruise. An ugly purple mark marred her left cheekbone, partially concealed by makeup but still visible. His jaw clenched, a muscle ticking beneath the skin. In his world, violence was a tool, a necessity, but seeing it marked on someone so innocent made his blood boil. She approached his usual booth, notepad in hand. Her eyes stayed fixed on the scratched tabletop, never meeting his gaze. "Welcome to Joe's. Can I get you started with some coffee?" Her voice was soft, almost trembling. Luca studied her, noting how she shifted her weight away from him, how her fingers gripped the notepad too tightly. Classic signs of fear, of someone used to being hurt. "The usual," he said, his voice deceptively calm. "And look at me when you're speaking." Ella's head snapped up automatically, like someone used to following orders. Their eyes met for a brief moment before she looked away again. The bruise looked worse up close, darker against her pale skin. "Right away, sir," she murmured, turning to leave. Before she could step away, Luca's hand shot out, wrapping around her slender arm. Not roughly, but with enough force to stop her in her tracks. She went completely still, like a rabbit caught in a snare. "Who did this to you?" The words came out as a growl, low and dangerous. His grip tightened slightly when she didn't respond immediately. Ella's face drained of color, her lips parting but no sound coming out. Her pulse raced beneath his fingers, fear rolling off her in waves. Still she remained silent. Luca leaned closer, his next words barely above a whisper but carrying the weight of a threat. "Tell me now, or I'll find out myself." The sleek black Mercedes-Benz idled quietly across from Joe's diner, its tinted windows concealing Luca Marino from curious eyes. His fingers drummed against the leather steering wheel as he watched the entrance, waiting. The afternoon crowd had thinned, leaving the parking lot nearly empty except for a few beat-up sedans belonging to the staff. His phone buzzed. Another report from Marco, one of his most trusted men. No suspicious activity during her shift. Just serving tables, avoiding eye contact with most customers. Luca's jaw clenched. It had been 3 days since he'd seen that bruise on Ella's face, and still no answers. The mystery of it consumed his thoughts, driving him to distraction during meetings, making him snap at his subordinates more than usual. He wasn't used to being denied information he wanted. Movement at the diner's entrance caught his attention. Ella emerged, having changed out of her uniform into worn jeans and an oversized sweater that made her look even smaller than she was. Her shoulders were hunched, her movements quick and nervous as she hurried across the parking lot. The bruise on her cheek had faded to a sickly yellow-green, but the sight of it still made his blood boil. She walked with purpose, keeping her head down and her arms crossed tightly over her chest. Classic defensive posture. Luca had seen it countless times in his line of work, people trying to make themselves invisible to avoid attention. But it only drew his attention more intensely. 2 of his men followed discreetly in a nondescript Honda, maintaining distance as Ella made her way down the busy street. Luca pulled out into traffic, several cars behind them. He watched as she stopped at a small grocery store, emerging with a single bag of necessities. Every movement spoke of someone trying to save money, counting every penny. The reports from his men painted a clearer picture with each passing day. She worked double shifts at the diner, lived alone in a rundown apartment building, and seemed to have few friends or social connections. No boyfriend had been spotted, which ruled out his initial theory about domestic abuse. The mystery deepened. Ella turned down a side street lined with aging apartment buildings, their brick facades stained with decades of city grime. She approached one of the shabbier buildings, fishing keys from her pocket with trembling fingers. Even from this distance, Luca could see how she scanned the street before entering, checking over her shoulder like someone expecting trouble. His phone rang. "Boss," Marco's voice came through the car's speakers. "We've got eyes on all entrances. No one suspicious has entered or left the building today." "Keep watching," Luca ordered, his voice sharp with authority. "I want to know everyone she talks to, everywhere she goes. If anyone so much as looks at her wrong, I want to know about it." He paused, his grip tightening on the steering wheel. "And find out everything you can about her family, her background. There's something she's hiding, and I want to know what it is." "Yes, boss," Marco replied before disconnecting. Luca watched as Ella disappeared into the building, his mind racing with possibilities. Someone had hurt her, marked her perfect skin with violence, and they would pay for that transgression. In his world, he was judge, jury, and executioner. And he had already passed sentence. He just needed to find the guilty party. His phone came to life again, and he barked into it. "Follow her. Don't let her out of your sight. I want to know everything." The morning sun cast long shadows through the diner's grimy windows as Luca read the latest report on his phone. His men had been thorough, watching Ella's movements for days now. No boyfriend, no regular male visitors. Nothing to explain the bruise that had first caught his attention. He sat in his office, the leather chair creaking as he leaned back, frustration building in his chest. The mystery surrounding this waitress was becoming an obsession, disrupting his usual laser focus on business. The fact that someone had marked her, had dared to touch what he now considered his to protect, made his blood simmer with barely contained rage. "Boss," Marco's voice crackled through the phone. "We've confirmed it. No boyfriend in the picture. She goes from work to home, home to work, sometimes stops at the grocery store or pharmacy. That's it." Luca's jaw clenched. He'd been certain it was domestic abuse. It usually was in cases like this. But now he had more questions than answers. "Keep watching," he ordered, ending the call. The drive to Joe's diner took exactly 7 minutes from his office. Luca noticed everything as he pulled into the parking lot. The few customers' cars, the delivery truck unloading supplies, the way the morning light hit the chrome trim of the building. He adjusted his Italian silk tie, straightened his perfectly tailored jacket, and stepped out of his Mercedes. The bell above the door chimed as he entered, but it was his presence that commanded attention. Conversations died mid-sentence. Forks stopped halfway to mouths. The entire atmosphere of the diner shifted, as if the air itself recognized the danger that had just walked in. Luca moved with predatory grace, his expensive shoes silent on the checkered linoleum floor. His dark eyes scanned the room, noting exits, potential threats, and finally landing on his target. Ella stood behind the counter, her hands frozen in the act of pouring coffee. The bruise on her cheek had faded to a sickly yellow, but it still made his fingers itch with the need to destroy whoever had put it there. He watched as she set down the coffee pot with trembling hands, watched as she tried to make herself smaller, less noticeable. It wouldn't work. Not with him. Never with him. The other waitress, an older woman with graying hair, took one look at Luca and disappeared into the kitchen. Smart woman. The few customers who remained suddenly found urgent reasons to leave, dropping bills on their tables as they hurried out. Luca approached the counter with measured steps, letting his presence fill the space between them. Ella's breath quickened, her chest rising and falling rapidly as he drew closer. He could smell her fear, mixed with something floral, probably her shampoo. The scent made him want to bury his face in her hair, to breathe her in until she was all he could smell. He placed his hands on the counter, the gesture casual, but his knuckles white with restraint. Ella remained frozen, like a rabbit caught in a predator's gaze. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken threats and promises. "I've had my men watching you," he said finally, his voice low and controlled. "They tell me there's no boyfriend, no man in your life who could have put that mark on your face." He leaned closer, close enough to see the gold flecks in her brown eyes. "So who was it, Bella? Who dared to touch what's mine?" Ella looked up from the counter, her hands trembling as Luca's intense gaze pinned her down. "You'll tell me the truth now, or I'll make you. Who hurt you?" She recoiled, her heart racing, but remained silent, refusing to reveal her secrets. The next few days at Joe's diner fell into an unsettling pattern. Like clockwork, Luca would arrive at precisely 9 a.m., choosing the same booth by the window. His presence alone changed the atmosphere. Customers spoke in hushed whispers, and the usual morning bustle became muted and tense. Ella tried to ignore him, but his dark eyes followed her every movement. She could feel the weight of his stare as she served other customers, filled coffee cups, and cleared tables. Her hands would shake slightly whenever she had to approach his booth, even though he never said a word during these visits. He'd simply order his usual black coffee, then sit there for hours, his attention never wavering from her. The other waitresses noticed. They whispered among themselves about the dangerous-looking man in the expensive suits who seemed fixated on Ella. Some offered to take his table, but Ella knew it wouldn't matter. His eyes would find her anyway. By the fourth day, the bruise on her cheek had faded to a barely visible yellow, but Luca's intensity hadn't diminished. If anything, it had grown stronger. He started leaving $100 tips that made her stomach churn with anxiety. The money felt like a claim, a way of marking his territory. On the sixth day, as she refilled his coffee, his hand brushed against hers. The touch was brief but deliberate, sending an unexpected jolt through her body. Ella nearly dropped the coffee pot, stumbling backward. When she dared to meet his eyes, she saw something that made her breath catch. Beneath the predatory gleam, there was a flicker of genuine concern. That moment haunted her throughout the day. She found herself thinking about his touch, about the way his presence both terrified and intrigued her. It was like standing at the edge of a cliff. The danger was clear, but something about the abyss called to her. The diner closed at 10, and Ella's shift ended with the usual routine of wiping tables and restocking supplies. The night air was cool as she stepped out, pulling her worn jacket tighter around her shoulders. Her thoughts were so focused on getting home that she didn't notice the figure leaning against the sleek black car across the street. "Ella?" His voice cut through the quiet night like a blade. She froze, her keys clutched tightly in her hand. Luca pushed himself away from the car, his movements fluid and purposeful as he approached her. The streetlight cast harsh shadows across his face, making him look even more dangerous than usual. "Why are you here?" she asked, hating how her voice trembled. He moved closer, and she backed up until she felt the rough brick wall of the building behind her. Luca placed one hand against the wall beside her head, effectively caging her in. The scent of his expensive cologne wrapped around her, making it hard to think clearly. "I've given you time," he said, his voice low and intimate. "Time to tell me the truth. Time to trust me." His other hand came up to brush against her cheek where the bruise had been. "But my patience has limits." Ella's heart hammered against her ribs. She could feel the heat radiating from his body, see the possessive glint in his dark eyes. This close, she could no longer pretend he was just another customer with an odd fixation. No, Luca Marino was something else entirely, something dangerous and powerful. "You can't escape me, Ella. You're mine now. I'll keep you safe, even if you don't want it." Her heart pounded in her chest. She realized the terrifying truth. Luca's world was dangerous, and she was now part of it. The black Mercedes pulled up outside Joe's diner just as Ella's shift ended. Her stomach dropped when she saw Luca step out, his tall frame cutting an imposing figure in his tailored black suit. The other waitresses whispered and stared as he strode inside, his presence immediately commanding the room. "Get changed," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "We're having dinner." In the cramped employee bathroom, Ella's hands trembled as she changed out of her uniform into the only decent outfit she'd brought, a simple black dress she kept for emergencies. The fabric was worn, and the hem was slightly frayed, but it was the best she had. She stared at her reflection, noting how pale she looked under the harsh fluorescent lighting. The drive was silent, tension thick in the air. Luca's driver navigated through the city, moving from her familiar neighborhood of worn-down buildings and discount stores to the glittering downtown district. They pulled up to La Rosa, the most exclusive Italian restaurant in the city. Ella had only seen it in magazine articles, never imagining she'd step foot inside. The maitre d' greeted Luca by name, leading them to a private corner booth draped in soft lighting. Crystal glasses sparkled on the white tablecloth, and the leather seats felt butter-soft against Ella's skin. Everything screamed wealth and power, from the original artwork on the walls to the sommelier who appeared instantly at Luca's subtle gesture. "Order whatever you like," Luca said, his dark eyes studying her face. "Money is no object." Ella picked up the menu, her eyes widening at the prices. A single plate cost more than she made in 2 days. "I'm not hungry," she lied, but her stomach betrayed her with a quiet growl. Luca's mouth curved into a slight smile. He ordered for both of them in perfect Italian, his voice smooth and commanding. The waiter hurried away, leaving them alone in their intimate corner. "You're not used to this," he observed, swirling the deep red wine in his glass. "Places like this aren't part of my world," Ella admitted, fidgeting with her napkin. "They could be." His words hung in the air between them. "I can give you everything you need, Ella. Protection, security, a life where you don't have to worry about making rent or working double shifts." The first course arrived, delicate plates of fresh burrata with heirloom tomatoes and basil. The contrast between this meal and her usual dinner of microwaved leftovers was stark. "Why me?" she asked, finally voicing the question that had been haunting her. "Why are you so interested in helping me?" Luca leaned back, his gaze intense. Because you're different. Pure, untouched by the darkness in this city. He paused, taking a sip of wine. But that won't last long. Not with the trouble following you. Fear gripped her heart. What do you mean? I know about your brother's debt, Ella. I know about the people he owes money to. They're not the kind who take no for an answer. The food turned to ash in her mouth. She set down her fork, hands trembling. How did you... I make it my business to know everything. Luca leaned forward, his voice soft but commanding. You will leave everything behind and come with me. This life is no place for someone like you. Ella's mind raced. Her brother's debt had been growing, the threats becoming more frequent. The bruise on her face was proof of how dangerous these people were. She thought of her tiny apartment, her struggling family, the dead-end job at the diner. Then she looked at Luca. Powerful, dangerous, but offering protection. Okay, she whispered, the word feeling like surrender and salvation all at once. The iron gates parted silently as Luca's Mercedes glided up the long driveway. Ella pressed her hands against her thighs, trying to stop their trembling as mansion-sized houses gave way to sprawling estates hidden behind thick hedges and stone walls. Luca sat beside her, his presence both suffocating and oddly reassuring. He hadn't spoken since they left the restaurant, but his hand rested, possessively on the seat between them, close enough that she could feel its warmth. The car finally stopped before a massive Mediterranean-style villa. 3 stories of pale stone rose before them, windows glinting in the fading sunlight. 2 men in dark suits emerged from the shadows, nodding respectfully as Luca helped Ella from the car. Welcome home, he said, his hand firm on her lower back, as he guided her toward the heavy wooden doors. The foyer took her breath away. Marble floors stretched endlessly, a crystal chandelier casting rainbow patterns across the walls. Everything spoke of wealth, from the antique furniture to the original paintings that must have cost more than she'd make in a lifetime. But there was something else, something that made her skin prickle. The house felt empty, perfect, but unlived in, like a museum after hours. Your room is upstairs, Luca said, leading her up a sweeping staircase. Their footsteps echoed in the silence. You'll find everything you need there. The bedroom was larger than her entire apartment. A massive 4-poster bed dominated the space, draped in cream-colored silks. A sitting area with plush chairs faced floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked manicured gardens. Double doors led to what appeared to be a walk-in closet larger than her kitchen back home. The bathroom is through there, Luca indicated another door. You'll find clothes in your size in the closet. My room is down the hall if you need anything. Ella wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly feeling very small in the enormous space. Am I allowed to leave? Luca's expression darkened. For now, no. It's not safe. He moved closer, and she fought the urge to step back. My men will guard the property. Don't try to run. You won't make it past the gates. So I'm your prisoner. The words came out before she could stop them. His hand shot out, catching her chin. The touch wasn't rough, but it demanded her attention. You're under my protection. There's a difference. Ella held his gaze, finding it harder to breathe with him so close. His cologne wrapped around her, expensive and masculine. And how long will this protection last? As long as necessary. His thumb brushed her cheek, just below where the bruise was fading. Get some rest. We'll talk more tomorrow. He turned to leave, but paused at the door. Ella had already moved to sit on the edge of the bed, her small frame dwarfed by the luxurious surroundings. She looked lost, vulnerable, and something flickered in his dark eyes. Ella felt the weight of his stare, heavy and assessing. The silence stretched between them, filled with unspoken warnings and promises. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, almost a growl. "This is for your own safety. Don't make me regret it." Ella's footsteps echoed through the vast hallways as she wandered the mansion, trying to maintain her sanity in this gilded cage. Every window she passed showed the same view, immaculate gardens surrounded by high walls, and beyond them, men in dark suits patrolling the perimeter. Their presence was a constant reminder that she wasn't a guest here, but a prisoner under the guise of protection. 3 days had passed since Luca brought her here. 3 days of luxury that felt more suffocating than comforting. The closet full of designer clothes in her size, the gourmet meals prepared by a silent chef, the endless rooms filled with expensive furniture. It all felt like pretty wrapping paper on a cage. She noticed how the security guard's eyes followed her every movement. When she lingered too long near a window, one would shift closer. If she walked in the garden, at least 2 men maintained a careful distance. They never spoke to her, but their message was clear. There was no escape. In the kitchen, Ella found temporary solace in making her own coffee. It was one of the few normal things she could still do, though even this simple act was watched by the staff. The marble counter was cool under her fingers as she wrapped them around the warm mug, seeking comfort in its familiar scent. "You haven't touched your breakfast," Maria, the housekeeper, observed quietly as she entered the kitchen. She was the only one who occasionally spoke to Ella, though her words were always careful, measured. "I'm not hungry," Ella replied, staring into her coffee. The elaborate spread laid out each morning felt like another chain binding her to this place. Through the kitchen window, she watched 2 guards change shifts, their movements precise and professional. One glanced toward the house, catching her eye, and Ella quickly looked away. She felt like a butterfly in a display case, beautiful but pinned in place. The day dragged on in tense silence. Ella tried reading in the library, but the words blurred together. She attempted to watch TV in the media room, but couldn't focus. Every room felt like another beautiful prison cell, and Luca's absence only heightened her anxiety. He hadn't been around much since bringing her here, leaving her alone with her thoughts and his watchful men. As evening approached, Ella returned to the kitchen, seeking the comfort of its familiar routines. She sat at the counter, absently tracing patterns on the marble surface, when she felt him before she heard him. The air seemed to change whenever Luca entered a room, becoming charged with an energy that made her skin prickle. His footsteps were quiet on the tile floor, but his presence filled the space. Ella kept her eyes down, her heart racing as he approached. He moved to stand directly in front of her, his tall frame casting a shadow over the counter. The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words. When she finally gathered the courage to look up, his dark eyes were fixed on her with an intensity that made her breath catch. His expression was unreadable, but there was something possessive in his gaze that made her want to run, even though she knew there was nowhere to go. "You're mine now, Ella," he said, his voice low and firm, brooking no argument. "There's no going back. I'll protect you, but you belong to me." The morning sun filtered through the mansion's tall windows, casting long shadows across the marble floors. Ella moved through her daily routine, feeling Luca's eyes following her from unseen corners. After weeks in his home, she'd developed a 6th sense for his presence, a prickling awareness that made her pulse quicken and her hands tremble. She busied herself in the library, organizing books that didn't need organizing. The leather-bound volumes felt solid and real under her fingers, unlike the strange tension that filled the air whenever Luca was near. Sometimes she'd catch him watching her from his study across the hall, his dark gaze intense and unreadable. He'd look away quickly, but the weight of his attention lingered. During meals, they sat at opposite ends of the long dining table. The silence between them crackled with unspoken words. Ella would focus on her plate, trying to ignore how his presence seemed to fill the room. But sometimes their eyes would meet across the polished wood, and something electric would pass between them. Those moments left her breathless, confused by the mix of fear and attraction that coursed through her veins. The staff had noticed, too. Maria, the housekeeper, would hide knowing smiles when Luca appeared in whatever room Ella occupied, making excuses about paperwork or phone calls. The security guards exchanged glances when their boss lingered in the gardens, watching Ella tend to the flowers she'd started growing to pass the time. One afternoon, Ella found herself in the kitchen, preparing tea. Her hands shook slightly as she reached for a cup, aware of Luca standing in the doorway. He didn't speak, just watched as she moved around the space. The silence between them felt different now, charged with something she couldn't name. "Would you like some?" she asked quietly, surprising herself. It was the first time she'd initiated conversation in days. Luca's eyes widened slightly, a crack in his usually stoic expression. He nodded, moving into the kitchen with the fluid grace of a predator. Ella's breath caught as he came closer, close enough that she could smell his expensive cologne. She poured his tea with trembling hands, nearly spilling when his fingers brushed hers as he took the cup. The days grew shorter as autumn approached, and Ella found herself spending evenings in the comfortable living room. The warm lighting and plush furnishings made it feel less imposing than the rest of the house. She curled up on the couch with a book, trying to lose herself in the pages. Luca began appearing during these quiet evenings, settling into an armchair with his laptop or phone. Though they rarely spoke, his presence became less threatening, almost comfortable. She caught herself watching him sometimes, studying the way his strong hands moved over keyboard keys, how his jaw clenched when he read concerning messages. Tonight, after a particularly long day of pacing the mansion's halls, Ella sat on the couch, her thoughts swirling like autumn leaves in the wind. She thought about her brother, about the debt that had brought her here, about the strange way her heart raced whenever Luca entered a room. The cushions shifted as he sat beside her, closer than usual. Her breath hitched at his proximity, but she didn't move away. His hand came to rest on her shoulder, warm and heavy through the thin fabric of her sweater. For the first time since coming here, she didn't flinch at his touch. The room seemed to grow smaller, more intimate. She could feel the heat radiating from his body as he leaned closer, his breath warm against her neck. "I'll protect you, Ella. Always," he whispered, his words carrying a weight that made her shiver. The air between them crackled with tension. Luca's hand moved from Ella's shoulder, trailing up to cup her face. His touch was gentle, contradicting everything she knew about this dangerous man. Her heart hammered against her ribs as his thumb traced the fading bruise on her cheek, the same mark that had first caught his attention. "I can't stay away from you anymore," he growled, his voice rough with need. His dark eyes blazed with an intensity that made her breath catch. Before she could respond, he pulled her to him, crushing his lips against hers. The kiss was desperate, possessive, everything she expected from a man like him. His hands tangled in her hair, holding her in place as he claimed her mouth. The heat of his body pressed against hers, overwhelming her senses. Ella's mind screamed at her to pull away, to remember who he was, what he represented. But her body betrayed her, responding to his touch with an eagerness that surprised them both. His cologne surrounded her, a masculine scent that made her head spin. One of his hands slid down to her waist, fingers digging into her hip as he pulled her closer. The gentleness from moments before had vanished, replaced by raw need. Ella found herself melting into him, her hands clutching his expensive shirt, wrinkling the fabric. The kiss deepened, and Luca groaned against her mouth. The sound sent shivers down her spine. This was wrong. So wrong. He was dangerous, a man who lived in a world of violence and power. Yet she couldn't deny the electricity between them, the way her body came alive under his touch. Luca's grip tightened possessively as he traced her bottom lip with his tongue. Ella gasped, giving him the access he sought. His kiss turned demanding, claiming every inch of her mouth as if marking his territory. The thought snapped her back to reality. With trembling hands, she pushed against his chest. Luca allowed her to break the kiss, but his arms remained locked around her, keeping her close. They were both breathing heavily, the sound loud in the quiet room. Ella could feel the rapid beat of his heart, where her hands still pressed against his chest. "This isn't who I am," she whispered, her voice shaking. She looked around the opulent room, at the evidence of his world of wealth and danger. "I don't belong here." The words came out breathless, uncertain. Luca's expression darkened, his jaw tightening. The tenderness from their shared moment vanished, replaced by something harder, more possessive. His fingers flexed against her hip, a reminder of his strength, of the control he held over her life. "You belong to me now," he said, his voice low and dangerous. His eyes bore into hers, unflinching. "Don't try to fight it." The morning sun filtered through the mansion's windows, casting long shadows across the marble floors. Ella sat at the kitchen island, absently stirring her untouched coffee when Luca strode in, his phone pressed to his ear. The tension in his shoulders made her stomach twist. "What do you mean he's there again?" Luca's voice was sharp, cutting through the quiet morning air. His dark eyes flicked to Ella, watching as she straightened in her seat. Her heart started racing. There was only one he they would be discussing: Michael, her brother. The spoon clattered against the ceramic mug as her hand began to shake. "Send Marco to watch the situation," Luca commanded into the phone, his free hand clenching into a fist. "Don't let him out of your sight." Ella stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. "What's happening?" Her voice cracked. "Is it Michael?" Luca ended the call, sliding the phone into his pocket. His jaw was tight as he moved closer to her. "The debt collector's been spotted outside your brother's apartment again. He's getting more insistent." The room spun. Ella gripped the counter's edge, her knuckles turning white. "No, no, no," she whispered. Images of the bruises the collector had left on her face flashed through her mind. If he was getting more aggressive with Michael? "Hey." Luca's voice was unexpectedly gentle as he crossed the space between them. His strong arms wrapped around her, pulling her against his chest. The familiar scent of his cologne filled her senses, and despite everything, she found herself leaning into him. "Breathe, Ella." She tried, but the panic was overwhelming. "You don't understand," she gasped. Last time he threatened to break Michael's legs, said he'd make an example of him." Her fingers clutched at Luca's shirt. "My brother's not strong like you. He can't." "Look at me." Luca's hand cupped her chin, forcing her to meet his gaze. His eyes were intense, focused entirely on her. "Your brother is under my protection now. No one touches what's mine." The possessiveness in his voice should have frightened her, but instead it sent a shiver down her spine. This was the man who'd claimed her, who'd turned her whole world upside down. And now, despite everything, he was her only hope of keeping Michael safe. "Please," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I can't lose him. He's all I have left." Something flickered in Luca's expression, a darkness she recognized all too well. His grip on her tightened fractionally. "You have me now," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "And I take care of what's mine." Ella's breath caught in her throat. She knew what that meant in his world, the violence that lurked beneath his controlled exterior, the power he wielded like a weapon. Part of her wanted to beg him not to hurt anyone, to find another way. But the memory of the debt collector's fist connecting with her face silenced those protests. Luca's thumb traced over her cheek, where the bruise had finally faded. His touch was gentle, but his eyes had turned cold, calculating. She could almost see him planning, deciding how to handle this threat to what he considered his territory. "I'll handle it," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. There was something dangerous in his voice, a promise of violence that made her shiver. Ella swallowed hard, remembering all too well the price of being under Luca's protection. The blood that stained his hands, the darkness that surrounded his world. She was part of that world now, whether she wanted to be or not. And so was Michael. Looking up into Luca's hard expression, she knew with certainty that someone was going to pay for threatening what belonged to him. The thought should have horrified her. Instead, she felt a twisted sort of relief, followed immediately by guilt. This was what his world had made of her. Someone who could find comfort in the promise of violence, as long as it meant keeping her loved ones safe. Ella sat on the edge of the leather couch in Luca's study, her hands twisting in her lap. The weight of her secret pressed against her chest, making it hard to breathe. Luca stood by the window, his silhouette dark against the evening light, waiting. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "About the bruise." He turned slowly, his eyes finding hers across the room. The intensity of his gaze made her throat tight, but she couldn't keep this from him anymore. Not when Michael was in danger. I lied before." Her fingers gripped the hem of her sweater. "It wasn't a boyfriend. I've never had anyone hurt me like that before." Luca moved closer, his footsteps silent on the thick carpet. He didn't speak, but his presence loomed over her, demanding the truth. "It was a debt collector," she continued, her voice shaking. "Michael, he borrowed money. A lot of money. He thought he could double it at the casino, pay it back before anyone noticed." She laughed bitterly. He lost everything instead. The leather creaked as Luca sat beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. His silence was deafening, filled with barely contained rage. "The collector started showing up at our places. First just warnings, then threats." Ella's hand unconsciously touched her cheek where the bruise had been. "That day, when you saw me at the diner, he'd come to our apartment that morning. He said he was done waiting." Luca's breathing changed, becoming deeper, more controlled. She knew that sound. It meant he was fighting to maintain his composure. Michael tried to explain, to ask for more time. "But the collector, Ella's voice cracked. "He started hitting Michael. I couldn't just watch. I got between them." "You put yourself in danger," Luca said, his voice dangerously soft. "For your brother." She nodded, tears burning in her eyes. "The collector grabbed my hair, slammed me against the wall, said if we didn't pay by the end of the month he'd do worse than leave bruises." Luca's hand shot out, gripping her chin. He turned her face toward him, his eyes scanning over her features as if searching for traces of that violence. "This collector," he growled. "Does he have a name?" "I don't know his real name. Michael called him Torres." Ella tried to look away, but Luca's grip held firm. "He works for someone else. Someone bigger. That's all I know." The muscle in Luca's jaw ticked. His other hand clenched into a fist on his thigh, knuckles white with restrained fury. "And you kept this from me," he said, each word precise and careful. "All this time." "I was scared," she admitted. "Not just of him, but of this world. Of what it would mean to ask for help." "You're mine now," Luca reminded her, his thumb brushing over her lower lip. "Your problems are my problems. Your brother's problems are my problems." His touch was gentle, but she could feel the violence simmering beneath his skin. This was the side of him she'd been afraid of, the Mafia boss who dealt in blood and pain. "Torres made a mistake," Luca continued, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "He put his hands on what belongs to me, marked your skin, threatened your family." His grip tightened fractionally. "This debt collector will regret crossing me. No one touches what's mine." Luca sat behind his mahogany desk, scrolling through files on his laptop. His men had been working overtime, following every lead about Torres. The name wasn't familiar, which bothered him. In his territory, he knew every collector, every enforcer. His phone buzzed. Marco, his head of security, had sent a message. "Boss, you need to see this." Within minutes, Marco entered the office, a thick manila folder in his hands. "We found Torres," he said, his face grim. "But you're not going to like it." Luca's fingers drummed against the desk. "Talk." Marco spread several photographs across the desk. They showed a stocky man with close-cropped hair entering various buildings, collecting payments. "Torres isn't his real name. It's Anthony Rizzo." The drumming stopped. Luca's hand went still. "Rizzo," he repeated, the name tasting like poison on his tongue. "Vincent's right hand." "Yes, boss. He's been running collections, in the South Side, but not just for us." Marco pulled out more photos, these showing Rizzo meeting with known members of rival families. "He's been double-dipping, taking our collections, then lending the money out again at higher rates, keeping the profits for himself." Luca stood slowly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. Vincent had been with him for 10 years, climbing the ranks to become one of his most trusted lieutenants. And now his own man was stealing from him, using his territory like a personal piggy bank. "The bruise on Ella's face," Luca said, his voice deadly quiet. "That was from Rizzo?" Marco nodded. "Her brother borrowed 50 grand. When he couldn't pay, Rizzo started making house calls." The rage that had been simmering in Luca's chest since Ella's confession now boiled over. One of his own men had touched her, threatened her, marked her skin. The betrayal wasn't just professional anymore. It was personal. "Where is Vincent now?" "In his office at the club. Regular Tuesday meeting with his crew." Luca straightened his tie, a gesture that made Marco take an instinctive step back. Everyone knew that when the boss adjusted his clothes, blood was about to flow. "Get the car ready." The drive to Vincent's club took 20 minutes. Luca spent each one in silence, his mind racing through every interaction he'd had with Vincent over the years. How many other betrayals had he missed? How many times had Vincent's loyalty been nothing but a carefully crafted lie? The club was quiet at this hour, the neon signs dark. 2 guards stood at the entrance, straightening when they saw Luca's car approach. They knew better than to stop him as he strode past, Marco and 2 other men flanking him. Music thumped from the basement office. As Luca descended the stairs, he could hear Vincent's laugh, the sound of glasses clinking. A celebration, perhaps, of another successful scam. The door burst open under Luca's kick. Vincent sat behind his desk, Rizzo and 3 other men arranged around him. Their laughter died instantly. "Boss," Vincent said, rising quickly. "We weren't expecting you. Sit down." Luca's voice cut through the air like a blade. Vincent sank back into his chair. His eyes darted to Rizzo, then back to Luca. "Is something wrong?" "You tell me, Vincent." Luca moved closer, each step measured. "Tell me about your side business, about how you've been stealing from me, lending my money without permission." The color drained from Vincent's face. "Boss, I can explain." "Tell me," Luca continued, his voice dropping lower, "about sending Rizzo here to terrorize innocent people in my territory, about having him put his hands on a woman under my protection." Understanding dawned in Vincent's eyes, followed quickly by fear. He knew. He knew exactly who Luca was talking about. Luca stood before his lieutenant, fury burning in his eyes. "You've been feeding from my empire, and now you'll pay the price. No one betrays me." Vincent's office had fallen silent, the music from upstairs a distant thrum. Luca's men held their weapons trained on Vincent's crew, who stood with their hands raised, sweat beading on their foreheads. "Start talking," Luca commanded, his voice dangerously soft. He circled Vincent's desk like a predator stalking prey. Every detail, every penny, every lie. Vincent's throat worked as he swallowed. "It started small," he said, his eyes fixed on Luca's shoes. "Just skimming a little off the top of collections. The economy was bad, boss. People couldn't pay." "So you decided to become a bank?" Luca's hand slammed down on the desk, making everyone jump. "Using my money?" "The interest rates were good," Vincent stammered. "I could double, sometimes triple the return. I was going to pay it all back." "By sending Rizzo to break bones?" Luca grabbed Vincent's chin, forcing him to look up. "To threaten women?" Rizzo shifted nervously against the wall. Marco pressed his gun harder into the man's temple. "I didn't know she was important to you," Vincent wheezed. "The girl, Ella, her brother kept missing payments. Rizzo was just following protocol." "My protocol?" Luca's grip tightened. "Since when does my protocol include hitting women?" Vincent's eyes watered. "It got out of hand. The debt started piling up. People were defaulting. I needed to make examples." "So you chose her." Luca's voice was winter frost. "Of all the people in this city, you chose to make an example of her." "Boss, please." Vincent tried to pull away, but Luca held firm. "How much?" When Vincent hesitated, Luca shook him. "How much have you stolen from me?" "2 million, Vincent whispered. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Luca released Vincent's face with disgust, wiping his hand on his suit jacket as if touching the man had left a stain. "And the other families?" Luca asked. "Marco showed me the photos. Who else have you been working with?" Vincent's silence was damning. Luca nodded to one of his men, who stepped forward and cracked the butt of his gun across Vincent's knuckles. The lieutenant screamed. "The Russos!" Vincent gasped, cradling his broken hand. "And the Calabresi family, they offered protection, in case you found out." Luca laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Protection? From me?" He leaned down, his face inches from Vincent's. "There is no protection from me, not in this city, not anywhere." "I can make it right," Vincent pleaded. "Give me time. I'll get your money back. You'll what?" Luca straightened, adjusting his cufflinks. "Return the peace of mind you stole from Ella? Erase the bruise your dog left on her face?" He glanced at Rizzo, who had begun to tremble. "No, Vincent. There's only one way this ends." Luca pulled out his phone, dialing a familiar number. After 2 rings, Ella's soft voice answered. "Luca." "I found them," he said, his tone gentler. "The men responsible for everything. Would you like to hear?" Them apologize? Vincent's eyes widened in terror. Before he could protest, Luca grabbed his throat. Tell her, he growled. Tell her what you did. I'm sorry, Vincent choked out. The debt, your brother, we shouldn't have. Enough. Luca released him, turning away as Vincent gasped for air. Into the phone, he said, You see, Ella? I keep my promises. Her breathing was shaky on the other end. What are you going to do to them? Luca looked at Vincent, at Rizzo, at the men who had betrayed his trust and hurt what was his. His voice was steel when he spoke. You betrayed me, and now you'll pay. Then, softer, meant only for her. But I'll fix this, Ella. I'll fix everything. Ella stood at the window of Luca's study, watching the rain streak down the glass. The mansion felt colder tonight, filled with shadows that seemed to whisper dark secrets. Behind her, Luca's voice carried through his phone, issuing orders in that deadly calm tone she'd come to recognize as his most dangerous. Clean it up, he commanded. Every trace, and bring me the ledgers. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying not to think about what cleaning up meant in his world. The past few hours had been a blur of men in dark suits moving through the house, their faces grim, their hands never far from their weapons. It's done, Marco reported, stepping into the study. His usually pristine suit was wrinkled, and there was something dark on his sleeve that Ella didn't want to identify. Vincent's associates have been dealt with. Luca nodded, his face an emotionless mask. And Rizzo? Waiting downstairs. Would you like me to bring him up? No. Luca's eyes flickered to Ella. Handle it elsewhere. I don't want that mess in my house. Ella's stomach churned. She knew what that meant. Rizzo, the man who had given her that bruise, would disappear tonight. Part of her wanted to protest, to say there must be another way. But she'd seen enough of Luca's world now to know that mercy was a foreign concept here. Marco left, and silence fell over the study. Luca moved to his desk, reviewing papers with methodical precision. Every few minutes, his phone would buzz with updates from his men. Each time, he'd issue another command, another death sentence, another order to erase someone's existence. 2 million, he muttered, more to himself than to her. Stolen from right under my nose. His pen scratched against paper as he made calculations. The Russos and Calabresi will need to be dealt with next. Ella watched his reflection in the window. In the darkened glass, he looked like something out of a nightmare. Beautiful and terrible. A man who could order deaths as easily as others ordered coffee. How many? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Luca looked up. How many what? How many people will die because of this? He set down his pen, studying her with those intense eyes. As many as necessary. And that doesn't bother you? Should it? He stood, moving toward her with that predatory grace. They betrayed me, Ella. They hurt you. In my world, that carries a price. She turned to face him, forcing herself to meet his gaze. Your world. Is that what this is? Just business? No. His hand came up to touch her cheek, right where the bruise had been. This is personal. Everything about you is personal. The tenderness in his touch contrasted sharply with the coldness she'd witnessed tonight. How could the same hands that signed death warrants touch her with such gentleness? I'm scared, she admitted. Good. His thumb traced her jawline. You should be. This world isn't kind, Ella. It's not meant to be. A commotion outside drew their attention. Through the window they watched as several black SUVs pulled up to the mansion, more of Luca's men, arriving with information or seeking orders. They'll keep coming, Luca said, his hand dropping to her shoulder. All night, tomorrow, the next day, Until every loose end is tied up, every traitor dealt with, every cent recovered. Ella shivered. And then? And then we start over. Rebuild. Stronger this time. He turned her to face him fully. But first, I need to know if you can handle this. If you can handle me. I don't know, she answered honestly. His expression softened marginally. I'll do whatever it takes to protect you. But trust doesn't come easy, and neither does my loyalty. The rain had finally stopped, but the air in Luca's mansion remained thick with tension. Ella watched from the second-floor landing as another group of men arrived, their dark suits and grim expressions becoming a familiar sight. They carried briefcases and spoke in hushed tones, their eyes darting around nervously. Through the ornate railings, she observed Luca holding court in his study below. His commanding presence filled the room as he issued orders, his voice carrying up to where she stood. The betrayal within his ranks had sparked a chain reaction, and now the entire syndicate was on edge. Sir, the Calabrese family is making moves, one of his men reported. They think we're vulnerable. Luca's laugh was cold, devoid of humor. Let them think that. Ella's hands gripped the railing tighter. She'd learned enough about his world to know that perceived weakness often led to violence. The thought made her stomach turn. Marco appeared at her side, his presence silent but imposing. The boss wants you downstairs. She followed him down, each step feeling heavier than the last. The study had emptied except for Luca, who stood by the window, his back to her. The setting sun cast long shadows across the room, making him look more dangerous than ever. Come here, he commanded without turning. Ella approached slowly, her heart hammering in her chest. When she reached him, he turned, his eyes dark with something that made her breath catch. They think they can use you against me, he said, his voice low. The other families, they've been watching. They know what you mean to me. I don't mean anything to you, she whispered, but the words felt hollow even to her own ears. His hand shot out, gripping her chin. Don't lie to yourself. You mean everything. His thumb traced her lower lip. You're my weakness, and they know it. The admission should have frightened her, but instead it sent a shiver down her spine. Luca's other hand found her waist, pulling her closer. I could send you away, he continued. Somewhere safe, where they couldn't find you. His grip tightened. But I won't. I can't let you go. She could feel the heat radiating from his body, smell the expensive cologne that clung to his skin. It was intoxicating, dangerous. Why not? Because you're mine. His words were a growl against her ear. Everything I do, every life I take, every move I make, it's all to protect what's mine. The reminder of his brutality snapped her back to reality. She'd seen what he was capable of, the casual way he ordered deaths, the coldness in his eyes when dealing with traitors. Luca must have sensed her withdrawal because his grip became possessive. He spun her fully into his arms, one hand tangling in her hair as he pulled her face to his. His lips brushed against hers, demanding, hungry. For a moment she lost herself in the kiss. It was everything she'd tried to deny wanting, passionate, consuming, perfect. But then she remembered the sound of gunshots in the night, the whispered conversations about bodies that needed disposing of, the dark stains she pretended not to see. She pulled away, her breath coming in short gasps. This isn't me, she whispered, her voice trembling. I can't live in this world. Luca's expression hardened, his eyes turning to steel. His hand remained in her hair, keeping her close as he spoke. You don't have a choice anymore. The night wrapped around Ella like a suffocating blanket as she crept through the mansion's darkened halls. Her heart thundered in her chest, each beat a reminder of what she was risking. She'd waited until Luca was occupied with his men, discussing another crisis in his empire, before making her move. Her fingers trembled as she punched in the security code she'd memorized days ago. The soft beep of acceptance nearly made her jump. The side door opened silently, and the cool night air hit her face. Freedom beckoned, just yards away. Ella's shoes crunched on the gravel as she hurried across the grounds, staying close to the shadows of the towering hedges. The guard rotation wouldn't change for another 7 minutes. She'd studied their patterns carefully. Her small backpack held only essentials: some cash, a change of clothes, her ID, everything else she'd leave behind in this golden cage. The perimeter wall loomed ahead, darker than the night sky. Ella's hands found the loose section of decorative lattice she'd discovered during her carefully planned garden walks. She grabbed the wooden slats, testing their strength. "Going somewhere?" Luca's voice, deadly quiet, froze her in place. Her stomach dropped as heavy footsteps approached from behind. Strong hands gripped her shoulders, spinning her around. Luca's face was a mask of barely controlled rage, his eyes glittering in the darkness. "Did you really think I wouldn't know?" His fingers dug into her arms. "That I wouldn't be watching?" "Let me go," Ella whispered, hating how her voice shook. "Please, Luca, I can't stay here." He pulled her roughly against his chest, one hand tangling in her hair. "You think I'm keeping you here against your will?" His laugh was harsh. "Look me in the eyes and tell me you don't feel this between us." "What I feel doesn't matter." She tried to push away, but his grip was iron. "Your world, it's destroying me. The violence, the secrets, the constant fear. I keep you safe," he snarled. "Everything I do is to protect you." "By killing people? By ordering executions like they're nothing?" Tears stung her eyes. "That's not protection, Luca. That's control." His hand tightened in her hair, forcing her to look up at him. "You knew what I was from the beginning. Don't pretend innocence now." "I never wanted this." The words came out broken. "I never wanted to be owned." Luca's other hand slid down her back, pressing her closer. "But you are owned." His breath was hot against her ear. "Every inch of you belongs to me. Your safety, your future. They're mine to protect." He began walking her backward, away from the wall, away from escape. Ella struggled, but his strength was overwhelming. "Please," she begged, "just let me go." "Never." The word was a promise and a threat. "You want to know why?" He stopped, forcing her to meet his gaze. "Because you're the only thing in this world that makes me feel human, the only person who sees past the monster they all fear." Tears spilled down Ella's cheeks. "That's not fair." "Life isn't fair, Kara." His thumb brushed away her tears, the gentle gesture at odds with his iron grip. "But I'll give you everything else, anything you want, except freedom from me." He guided her back toward the mansion, his arm like a steel band around her waist. Each step felt like surrender, like chains tightening around her heart. The cool night air that had promised freedom now felt like it was suffocating her. Luca stopped at the door, turning her to face him. He stood over her, his expression hard and unyielding. "You can't leave me, Ella. Not now, not ever. You're mine." Ella's heart raced as the truth of her situation crashed over her. She was trapped in his world, bound by invisible chains stronger than any physical restraints. The realization settled in her chest like lead. There would be no escape from Luca Marino. The morning sun filtered through the mansion's windows, casting long shadows across the marble floors. Ella sat at the kitchen counter, absently stirring her untouched coffee, when Luca's phone rang. His expression darkened as he listened. his knuckles turning white around the device. "What do you mean he's gone?" Luca's voice cut through the silence like a blade. Ella's head snapped up, her heart stopping as Luca's eyes met hers. Something was wrong. Terribly wrong. "Michael," she whispered, already knowing. The coffee cup slipped from her trembling hands, shattering on the floor. "What happened to my brother?" Luca held up a hand, listening intently to the caller. "Send everyone we have. Lock down the area. No one leaves the city." He ended the call, his jaw clenched tight. "Tell me," Ella demanded, her voice breaking. "Please, Luca, what happened to Michael?" "The debt collector's men took him an hour ago." Luca's words were measured, controlled, but his eyes blazed with fury. "They grabbed him outside his apartment." Ella's legs gave out, but Luca caught her before she hit the floor, guiding her to a nearby chair. Her whole body shook. "This is my fault. If I hadn't gotten involved with you—" "No!" Luca's voice was sharp. "This is their mistake. They think they can use him to control me, to force my hand." He crouched before her, his hands gripping her shoulders. "They're wrong." Tears streamed down Ella's face as panic clawed at her chest. "They'll hurt him. Oh God, they're going to hurt him because of me." "Look at me," Luca commanded, his fingers tilting her chin up. "Your brother is leverage. They won't harm him as long as they think he's useful." A sob escaped her throat. "You don't know that. You can't know that. I know how these men think." His thumb brushed away her tears. "They want to prove they can touch what belongs to me, that they can make me bend." His expression hardened. "They've made a fatal mistake." The security room door burst open, and one of Luca's men rushed in. "Boss, we've got a location. They're holding him at the old warehouse district." Luca straightened, his presence filling the room. "Get the cars ready. I want every available man armed and in position within the hour." "Please!" Ella grabbed his arm. "Don't let them kill him. I'll do anything. You'll stay here." Luca cut her off, his tone brooking no argument. "Under heavy guard. They took your brother to get to me through you. I won't give them another target. I can't just sit here while—" "You can, and you will." His voice softened slightly. "Trust me, Ella. Your brother is my priority now." More men filed into the room, their faces grim. They spoke in hushed tones, discussing tactical positions and response times. Ella watched helplessly as Luca transformed before her eyes, becoming the ruthless Mafia boss she sometimes forgot he was. He barked orders, his authority absolute. "I want eyes on every exit. No one moves without my command. If they try to run, shoot them." Ella hugged herself, trembling. This was her fault. Her brother was in danger because she'd caught Luca's attention, because she'd become his weakness. The thought made her sick. Luca turned back to her, his expression unreadable. "I'll get him back. No one threatens what's mine." He stormed off, leaving Ella to fear what was about to happen next. The convoy of black SUVs tore through the empty streets of the warehouse district, engines roaring in the night. Luca sat in the lead vehicle, his phone pressed to his ear as reports flooded in from his surveillance teams. "They're holding him in the East Wing," his man reported. 2 guards at each entrance, more inside. "They're waiting for you, boss." Luca's jaw clenched. "How many?" "At least 15 men, all armed." The warehouse loomed ahead, a hulking shadow against the star-studded sky. Luca checked his gun, the metal cold against his palm. "Keep your distance. No one moves until I give the signal." The SUVs spread out, surrounding the building in a silent dance of precision. Luca's men moved like shadows, taking their positions. Through his earpiece, he heard their whispered confirmations. "Target acquired. West entrance secured. Snipers in position." Luca stepped out of the vehicle, his expensive suit a stark contrast to the grimy surroundings. The warehouse air reeked of rust and diesel. His footsteps echoed as he approached the main entrance, alone and seemingly vulnerable. The guards raised their weapons. "That's far enough, Marino. Where's Michael Delgado?" Luca's voice carried across the empty lot, dangerous and controlled. A figure emerged from the shadows, one of the debt collector's lieutenants, Marco. His smile was all teeth. "The boss wants to talk terms first." "There are no terms." Luca's eyes were dark with promise. "You took something that belongs to me. Now you'll pay the price." Marco's smile faltered. "You've gone soft, Marino. All this for some waitress's brother? The old you would have—" The shot rang out before Marco could finish. He crumpled, clutching his knee as blood pooled beneath him. The guards opened fire, but Luca was already moving. His men emerged from the shadows like wraiths, their coordinated assault precise and brutal. Gunfire erupted from all sides as Luca advanced, each step measured and deadly. Bodies fell around him as he made his way inside. The warehouse interior was a maze of shipping containers and old machinery. Luca moved through it like a predator, his instincts razor-sharp. He could hear fighting echoing through the building, his men clearing each section methodically. A voice called out from above, "Stop right there, Marino." On a metal catwalk, two men held Michael between them. The young man's face was bruised, but he was alive. The debt collector's second-in-command, Tony, pressed a gun to Michael's temple. "One more step and the kid dies," Tony shouted. "Is he really worth all this trouble?" Luca's voice was ice. "You should have thought about that before you touched him." "The great Luca Marino," Tony sneered, "throwing away everything for some girl and her worthless brother. What happened to you?" "Last chance," Luca warned. "Let him go, and I'll make it quick." Tony laughed. "You're not in a position to—" Two shots rang out simultaneously. The men holding Michael dropped, red blooming on their chests. Tony's eyes widened in surprise as he looked down at the growing stain on his shirt. Luca's snipers had been waiting for their moment. Michael stumbled forward as Tony fell. Luca's men secured the catwalk, helping the young man down. Around them, the sounds of fighting died out as the last pockets of resistance were eliminated. Luca approached Michael, checking him for serious injuries. "Are you hurt?" "I'll live," Michael managed, though his voice shook. They wanted to use me to get to you, because of Ella." "They made a mistake." Luca's hands were red with blood as he steadied Michael. "No one threatens my family." The warehouse fell silent, except for the groans of the wounded and dying. Luca stood in the center of the carnage he'd created, his suit spattered with crimson, his expression cold and satisfied. He'd shown them exactly what happened to anyone who dared to challenge him. His phone buzzed, a message from the mansion. Ella was waiting, scared and uncertain. But now he could return to her victorious, her brother safe, though his hands were stained with the price of that protection. The basement of Luca's estate was cold, the concrete walls amplifying every sound. Anthony Russo, once a trusted lieutenant, now knelt before Luca, his expensive suit torn and bloodied. The debt collector's operation had crumbled, leaving him alone to face his boss's wrath. Ella stood in the shadows, her presence requested by Luca himself. She wanted to look away but couldn't, transfixed by the scene unfolding before her. This was the dark world she'd been pulled into, raw and unfiltered. "Please, boss," Anthony begged, his voice cracking. "I can explain everything." Luca circled him slowly, his footsteps echoing. His usually immaculate appearance was slightly disheveled, sleeves rolled up, jacket discarded. There was something predatory in his movements, like a wolf closing in on wounded prey. "Explain?" Luca's voice was deceptively soft. "Explain how you went behind my back?" How you terrorized innocent people, people under my protection? His eyes flicked briefly to Ella before returning to Anthony. The operation was getting soft, Anthony stammered. We needed to show strength, maintain our reputation. When I found out about the girl's brother's debts, Luca's hand shot out, gripping Anthony's throat. You touched what was mine. His fingers tightened. You marked her face. You threatened her family. Two of Luca's men stood guard by the door, their faces impassive. They'd seen this before, the moment when their boss reminded everyone why he ruled with absolute authority. I didn't know she was yours, Anthony choked out. Not at first. By the time you realized, Luca released him roughly. You should have come to me. Instead, you tried to hide it. Tried to clean up your mess by threatening her brother. Ella wrapped her arms around herself, remembering the bruise that had started it all. The fear when the debt collector had grabbed her, marked her. She'd been terrified then, but that fear was nothing compared to watching Luca now. Anthony tried a different approach. Think about my loyalty all these years. Everything I've done for the family. One mistake shouldn't... One mistake? Luca's laugh was sharp and cold. You've been skimming from collections for months, taking more than your share, running unauthorized operations. Did you think I wouldn't notice? Sweat beaded on Anthony's forehead. I can pay it back, double, triple, whatever you want. This isn't about money. Luca pulled out his gun, the metal gleaming under the harsh lights. This is about respect, about loyalty, about understanding who you belong to. Anthony's composure cracked completely. He lunged forward, grabbing at Luca's legs. Please, I have a family, children. And I protected them, Luca said quietly. Gave them a good life, security. This is how you repay me? Ella watched as Luca's expression hardened. She could see the moment mercy died in his eyes, replaced by something darker, something final. This was the man who ruled the underworld, who commanded fear and respect in equal measure. You will never betray me again, Luca declared, his voice carrying the weight of judgment. The gunshot echoed through the basement, making Ella flinch. Anthony's body crumpled to the floor, the betrayal in his eyes fading to emptiness. Luca stood over him, power radiating from every inch of his frame. Ella couldn't move, couldn't breathe. She was horrified by the violence, yet something else stirred inside her. A dark fascination with the raw power Luca wielded. He'd done this for her, to protect her. The realization sent shivers down her spine. The metallic scent of blood lingered in the air as Luca's men carried Anthony's body away. Ella remained frozen in her corner of the basement, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. The concrete walls seemed to close in, making the space feel smaller, more intimate, despite the horror that had unfolded moments ago. Luca stood with his back to her, his shoulders tense under his white shirt. He'd removed his suit jacket earlier, and now crimson spots stained the crisp fabric. His gun was still in his hand, a deadly extension of his will. You can go upstairs if you want, he said quietly, not turning around. His voice held none of the coldness from earlier, but Ella could still hear the echo of his final judgment in her mind. She should run. Every rational part of her screamed to flee from this man who could end a life without hesitation. But her feet remained rooted to the spot. I'll stay. At her words, Luca finally turned. His face was a mask of careful control, but his eyes blazed with something intense, something that made her breath catch. He placed the gun on a nearby table and took a step toward her. You're afraid, he stated, watching her closely. Yes, Ella admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. But not of you. The confession hung between them. She was afraid of what he represented, of the world he inhabited, of the darkness that seemed to follow him like a shadow. But the man himself? He had never made her feel anything but protected, even in his most violent moments. Luca closed the distance between them slowly, as if approaching a wounded animal. His hands, the same hands that had dealt death minutes ago, were gentle as they cupped her face. "I would never hurt you, Ella. You know that?" She leaned into his touch despite herself. "I know. That's what scares me the most." The basement lights cast harsh shadows across his features as he studied her. His thumb traced the spot where her bruise had been, now long faded but forever etched in his memory. "Everything I've done was to keep you safe, to make sure no one ever touches you again." "At what cost?" Ella asked, her voice trembling. "How many more people have to die?" "As many as it takes." His answer was immediate, unwavering. "I've lived in darkness my whole life, Ella. I accepted it, embraced it even. But then you walked into that diner with a bruise on your face, and suddenly the darkness wasn't enough anymore." She could feel his heartbeat under her palm as she placed her hand on his chest. The expensive fabric of his shirt couldn't hide the warmth of him, the very human reality of this man who dealt in death and power. "You can't protect me from everything," she whispered. "Watch me try." His arms slid around her waist, pulling her closer. The scent of his cologne mixed with gunpowder surrounded her. "I've never wanted anything the way I want you, never needed to protect something so fiercely." Ella looked up at him, seeing the struggle in his eyes. He was a man caught between worlds, the ruthless Mafia boss who commanded fear and respect, and the protector who would burn the world to keep her safe. The duality should have repulsed her, but instead it drew her in deeper. "I did it for you," Luca whispered, his lips brushing against her temple. His grip tightened, possessive yet gentle. "I'll always do whatever it takes for you." The words settled over her like a weight, a promise that was both beautiful and terrible. Ella closed her eyes, feeling the tears threaten to fall. She understood now. Their love would always come with a price, painted in shades of red and darkness. But as Luca held her in that basement where violence and tenderness collided, she realized she was willing to pay it. The morning light filtered through the mansion's tall windows, casting long shadows across the marble floors. Ella stood in the kitchen, her hands wrapped around a coffee mug, watching as Luca's men patrolled the grounds outside. Their presence was a constant reminder of the world she now inhabited, a world of violence wrapped in luxury. Luca entered silently, his footsteps barely making a sound. He wore one of his impeccably tailored suits, every inch the powerful Mafia boss. But when he approached her, his touch was gentle as he placed his hands on her shoulders. "You didn't sleep," he observed, his voice low and intimate. Ella shook her head, unable to meet his eyes. The events in the basement kept replaying in her mind, the cold efficiency with which Luca had handled his betrayer, the way he'd looked at her afterward with such tenderness. The contrast was jarring. "I keep seeing it," she admitted. The look in your eyes when you pulled the trigger." Luca's grip tightened slightly. "That's who I am, Ella. I won't apologize for protecting what's mine." She finally turned to face him, studying the hard lines of his face. In the morning light, she could see every detail clearly. The slight shadows under his eyes, the tension in his jaw, the intensity that never quite left his gaze. This was the man who had claimed her, who had wrapped her in his darkness and called it protection. "Your men found 3 more of Anthony's associates," he said, watching her reaction carefully. "They've been dealt with." Ella's stomach churned. More death, more violence, all in her name. "When does it end?" when there's no one left who would dare threaten you?" His answer was immediate, absolute. He moved closer, backing her against the kitchen counter. "This is my world, Ella. The sooner you accept that, the easier it will be." She could feel the heat of him, the raw power that emanated from his body. Even in moments like this, when he was being gentle with her, there was no mistaking the danger that lurked beneath his surface. She had seen what those hands could do, yet they touched her with such care. "I see the way you look at me now," Luca continued, his voice dropping lower. "Like you're trying to reconcile the man who holds you at night with the one who pulls the trigger. But they're the same person, Ella. I won't pretend to be something I'm not." His honesty was brutal, unapologetic. Ella reached up, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "I know who you are, Luca. That's what scares me. Not that you're capable of such violence, but that I'm starting to understand why you do it." Something flickered in his eyes. Satisfaction, perhaps, or triumph. His hands slid to her waist, pulling her closer. "You're learning. This world isn't black and white. Sometimes the darkest acts come from the purest intentions." She thought about her brother, safe now because of Luca's intervention. She thought about the bruise that had started all of this, how Luca had systematically destroyed everyone who had dared to harm her. The price of his protection was high, but he paid it without hesitation. "Your hands are stained with blood," she whispered, even as she leaned into his touch. "Yes," he agreed simply, "and they always will be. But they'll never harm you, Ella. Everything I do, every life I take, every order I give, it's all to keep you safe." His intensity should have frightened her, but instead it made her feel oddly secure. In Luca's world, love and violence were inextricably linked. He showed his devotion through protection, his affection through elimination of threats. Luca took her face in his hands, his touch possessive yet tender. His eyes bore into hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "I did this for you. Everything. You'll never leave me." The morning sun cast harsh shadows through Luca's office windows as he reviewed the latest reports. His empire was shifting beneath his feet, allies questioning his decisions, whispers of weakness spreading through the ranks. The stack of papers on his mahogany desk told a story of unrest. Marco, his most trusted advisor, stood before him with a grim expression. "3 more families have withdrawn their support, boss. They're saying your attachment to the girl has made you soft." Luca's jaw tightened, his fingers drumming against the polished wood. The betrayals were mounting, like dominoes falling one after another. His decision to protect Ella, to burn through his own organization to keep her safe, had consequences he couldn't ignore anymore. "And what do you think, Marco?" Luca's voice was dangerously quiet. Marco shifted uncomfortably. "With respect, boss, they're not entirely wrong. The way you handled Anthony's situation, it was messy, personal. You could have contained it quietly, but instead, I made an example of him," Luca cut in, standing slowly. "I showed everyone what happens when they cross me. You showed them you'd tear apart your own empire for a woman." The truth of it hung heavy in the air. Luca moved to the window, watching his men patrol the grounds below. Each one of them was a potential threat now, their loyalty questionable in the wake of his actions. He'd built this empire on fear and respect. Both were slipping through his fingers. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. One of his guards entered, tension evident in his stance. "Sir, there's been an incident at the warehouse on 5th. Someone tried to burn it down." Luca's hands clenched into fists. The warehouse housed millions in product, a direct attack on his business, his power. "Casualties?" "2 of our men, boss. They're saying it was the Rossi family." The Rossis had been allies for generations. Their betrayal was a clear message. Luca's protection wasn't worth what it used to be. His obsession with Ella had created cracks in his fortress, and his enemies were slipping through. He dismissed the guard with a sharp nod, turning back to Marco. "Call a meeting. Every captain, every lieutenant. Tonight. And the girl? Ella stays where she is. Double the guards on her detail." Marco hesitated. "Boss, maybe if you sent her away for a while, just until things settle." The look Luca gave him could have frozen hell. "She stays." After Marco left, Luca sat heavily in his chair. The empire he'd built, the power he'd accumulated, it was all meant to protect him from the vulnerabilities his father had warned him about. Love was weakness, his father had said. Love would destroy everything they'd built. But Ella, she wasn't just love. She was redemption, a light in his darkness. The thought of her leaving, of losing her, made his chest tight with an unfamiliar panic. He found her in the library, curled up in one of the oversized armchairs with a book. She looked up as he entered, her expression softening despite everything she knew about him, everything she'd seen him do. "Something's wrong," she said. It wasn't a question. Luca crossed the room in long strides, pulling her up and into his arms. She came willingly, her body fitting against his like she was made for him. The scent of her hair, the warmth of her skin, it centered him, reminded him why all of this was worth it. "The empire's crumbling," he admitted against her hair. "They think you've made me weak." Ella tensed in his arms, but he held her tighter, refusing to let her pull away. "Maybe they're right," she whispered. "No." His voice was firm, absolute. "They don't understand. Everything I've built, everything I am, it means nothing without you." He pulled back just enough to look into her eyes, his gaze intense. "You're the only thing worth saving. I will protect you, no matter the cost." Morning light streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of their seaside villa in Malta, casting golden shadows across Ella's face as she stood at the kitchen counter, preparing coffee. The sound of waves crashing against the rocky shore below provided a peaceful backdrop to their new life, a stark contrast to the chaos they'd left behind. 6 months had passed since they'd walked away from the Empire, since Luca had handed control to his most trusted captains and disappeared with Ella into the Mediterranean sunshine. The transition hadn't been easy. There were nights when Luca would wake up in a cold sweat, his body tensed for a fight that wasn't coming, times when his hand would instinctively reach for a weapon that was no longer there. But those moments were becoming fewer, replaced by softer memories. Ella's laugh echoing through their home, the way her hair caught the sunlight as she read by the pool, the peaceful expression on her face as she slept beside him. Ella felt his presence before she saw him. That magnetic pull between them hadn't diminished with time. His footsteps were nearly silent on the marble floor, a habit from his previous life that he couldn't quite shake. His arms wrapped around her waist from behind, and she leaned back into his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. "You're up early," she murmured, turning her head slightly to brush her lips against his jaw. The rough stubble there tickled her skin. "Old habits," he replied, but there was no tension in his voice now. Just contentment. His hands splayed across her stomach, holding her close as if she might disappear if he let go. "I was watching the sunrise and thinking about how different everything is now." Ella turned in his arms, studying his face. The hardness that had once defined his features had softened, though his eyes remained as intense as ever when they looked at her. "Do you miss it?" she asked quietly. Luca's thumb traced her cheekbone, his touch gentle. so different from the man who had once commanded an empire through fear and violence. The power? The control? He shook his head. I have everything I need right here. She reached up to touch the scar on his neck, a reminder of the life they'd left behind. Sometimes I wonder if it was worth it, giving up everything you built. I didn't give up everything, he corrected her, catching her hand and pressing a kiss to her palm. I chose what mattered most. The empire was built on blood and fear, Ella. This, us, it's built on something real. Sunlight filled the kitchen, warming the space around them. Outside, their garden bloomed with Mediterranean flowers, their colors bright against the white stone walls. It was a different kind of luxury than the cold opulence of his former mansions. This was warmth, life, peace. Ella moved to the French doors leading to their terrace, Luca following close behind. The sea stretched endlessly before them, blue waters merging with the horizon. Here, they were just a man and a woman in love, not a mafia boss and his captive-turned lover. The weight of their past felt lighter with each passing day. Dance with me, Luca said suddenly, pulling her into his arms. There was no music playing, but they didn't need any. They swayed together, bare feet on sun-warmed stone, the morning breeze carrying the scent of jasmine from their garden. I never thought I could have this, Ella admitted, her head resting against his chest. When you first took me, when I saw your world, I thought I'd always be trapped in darkness. You brought the light, he murmured into her hair. You showed me there was more to life than power and control. You gave me something worth changing for. They moved together in comfortable silence, their bodies in perfect sync. The guards patrolling the perimeter of their property were discreet, a necessary precaution, but no longer the suffocating presence they'd once been. This was freedom, or as close to it as they could get. Luca pulled back slightly, his hands coming up to frame her face. His eyes held hers, full of an emotion that still amazed her to see. Pure, unconditional love. I love you, Ella. Forever. The Mediterranean sun painted their bedroom in warm, golden hues as Ella stirred from sleep. The silk sheets whispered against her skin as she reached across the bed, finding Luca's space empty but still warm. She smiled, knowing exactly where to find him. Their villa, perched on a secluded hillside, overlooking the sea, had become their sanctuary over the past months. The transition from Luca's dark world to this peaceful existence hadn't been immediate or easy, but they'd made it work. Together. Ella pulled on a light cotton robe and padded barefoot through the sun-drenched halls. Family photos now lined the walls instead of security cameras, snapshots of their new life replacing the cold vigilance of their past. The marble floors, warmed by the morning sun, felt smooth beneath her feet. She found him on their private terrace, his broad shoulders relaxed as he leaned against the stone railing. The sight of him still took her breath away, not because of the power he commanded or the fear he could instill, but because of the man he'd become. The man who'd chosen love over empire. You're thinking too hard, she said softly, approaching him from behind. Luca turned, and the smile that crossed his face was genuine, something that had once been rare but now came naturally. He wore only loose linen pants, his chest bare to the morning sun. The scars that marked his skin told stories of his past life, but they were just memories now. Just appreciating the view, he replied, opening his arms to her. Ella stepped into his embrace without hesitation, something that would have been unthinkable when they first met. His arms encircled her waist, and she felt the steady beat of his heart against her cheek. The sea is beautiful today, she murmured, looking out at the endless blue horizon. I wasn't talking about the sea. His voice rumbled in his chest, and she felt his lips press against her temple. I was thinking about how different everything is now, how different I am. Ella traced her fingers along his arm, following the line of an old tattoo. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "The power? The control?" He shook his head, his grip tightening slightly. "I have everything I need right here. That life, it was empty. I didn't realize how empty until you showed me there could be more." The morning breeze carried the scent of the jasmine they'd planted in the garden below. Their home was alive with growing things now, flowers, herbs, fruit trees, life instead of death, beauty instead of violence. "Remember when you first brought me to your mansion?" Ella asked, turning in his arms to face him. "I was so scared of you." Luca's expression softened with regret. "I was a different man then. Cruel, controlling." "But you changed," she reminded him, reaching up to touch his face. "You chose to be better, to be more." His hand covered hers, pressing it against his cheek. The calluses on his palms were softening now that he no longer handled weapons daily. "I chose you," he corrected. "Everything else followed from that choice." They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the sun climb higher in the sky. Below them, their gardens bloomed in riots of color, reds, purples, yellows, so different from the stark, militaristic grounds of his old properties. "Dance with me," she said suddenly, pulling back slightly. Luca raised an eyebrow but didn't hesitate. He took her hand in his other arm wrapping around her waist as they began to sway to music only they could hear. The morning sun warmed their skin as they moved together, their shadows merging on the terrace stones. "I never thought I could have this," he admitted quietly. "Peace, happiness, love without possession or control." Ella's hand slid up to rest over his heart. "You always had it in you, Luca. You just needed to find your way there." He leaned down, pressing his forehead against hers. His eyes, once cold and calculating, now held only warmth when they looked at her. "You showed me the way," he whispered. "You saved me from myself." Ella looked up at him with a smile. "You're mine, Luca. Forever." I hope you like this story. Please share what's your favorite part of the story and where in the world you are watching from. Have a wonderful day.